Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to unlock a completely hidden language. It's a language that almost all of us interact with, yet very few of us actually speak. I'm talking about the medical coding system. In this explainer, we aren't just going to look at dry manuals or, stare at random letters and numbers. We're going to reveal the strict hidden grammar of healthcare and focus entirely on why specific sequencing rules matter. Because, as you'll see, in the world of medical coding, the order in which a story is told can literally change reality itself. Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine a surgeon performs two minor procedures on a patient during the exact same visit. The medical coder has two codes to enter into the billing system. What happens if they just happen to put the second code first and the first code second? Does it really matter? I mean, both procedures were done, right?
Well, it turns out that a simple flip of two minor surgery codes results in an instant loss of exactly $17.71 for the hospital. Now, that might not sound like a huge deal right now, but imagine that exact error happening thousands of times a week across a massive health system. Simply putting two codes in the wrong order instantly changes the financial compensation for the healthcare provider. Sequencing matters because sequencing equals cold, hard cash.
And this brings us to the very real human element behind the screen. As certified professional coder Kathy Buck denotes, the pressure to improve medical revenue is a constant force in today's workplace. Coders have to stay incredibly focused and firm. They aren't just data entry clerks, right? They are the financial guardians of healthcare facilities, and they're navigating an incredibly complex web of rules where the sequence is absolutely everything.
Section 1. The hidden healthcare language.
To truly grasp this, we have to stop thinking of medical codes as just the list of supplies on a grocery receipt, and start thinking of them as a strict grammatical system where sequence dictates reality. Think about standard English grammar for a second. The sentence, "The dog bit the man," uses the exact same words as "the man bit the dog." But just by changing the sequence, you've completely rewritten the narrative. One is a common unfortunate event, the other makes the evening news. Well, medical coding works the exact same way. If you change the sequence of the codes, you completely rewrite the narrative of the patient's hospital visit, altering what the primary medical issue was, how it was treated, and ultimately how it gets billed.
Section 2. The principal diagnosis. This brings us to the absolute foundation of the coding hierarchy, determining what the main problem actually is. And the terminology and the rules change heavily depending on whether you're admitted to a hospital or just visiting a clinic. For an inpatient setting, coders look for the principal diagnosis, which is the condition established after study to be chiefly responsible for occasioning the admission to the hospital. But in an outpatient setting, they use the first listed diagnosis, which is simply the main reason for the visit that day. This single distinction fundamentally shifts how a coder sequences the patient's story.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it plays out in the real world with something called a rule-out diagnosis in a hospital setting. Let's say a patient is admitted with severe chest pain and sweating. The doctors suspect a heart attack, a myocardial infarction, or MI. For 36 hours, they run intense, highly expensive diagnostics to rule out an MI. Ultimately, the patient is totally fine. The final diagnosis is just anxiety and heartburn. But because the hospital expended the massive resources required for a heart attack patient, the sequencing rules state that the hospital actually reports the rule-out diagnosis, the MI, as the principal diagnosis. The sequence of codes reflects the resources used, not just the final result. Crazy, right?
Section 3. Cause and effect.
Moving beyond just the primary diagnosis, coders have to navigate the complex relationship between diseases that trigger other diseases. And the ICD-10-CM guidelines are incredibly rigid about cause and effect. They use a strict code first and use additional code rule. Step 1 is always coding the underlying cause, which is known as the etiology. Step 2 is coding the symptom or the resulting condition, known as the manifestation. You literally cannot mix these up. The underlying cause must always take the spotlight.
For instance, the guidelines dictate that if a patient has dementia caused by Parkinson's disease, the Parkinson's code, the underlying etiology, absolutely must be sequenced first, followed by the dementia code. Or, if a patient has type 1 diabetes that causes a degenerative eye condition called retinopathy, the diabetes must be sequenced before the retinopathy. The sequence tells the insurance company exactly what caused what.
Section 4. Ordering injuries and illnesses. Let's see how this builds when we introduce the chaotic reality of multiple traumas. When a patient arrives with multiple injuries, the sequencing rules basically act as a triage system to bring order to the medical emergency. The coder has to follow a rapid-fire set of strict hierarchies. The most severe injury is always sequenced first.
If a patient has an acute condition and a chronic one, the acute comes first. If a patient has multiple burns, the highest degree of burn takes the top spot. The rules are so strict that superficial injuries, like a minor abrasion on the knee, aren't even coded at all if there's a more severe injury, like a fracture at that exact same site. The lesser injury is just completely absorbed by the greater one in the sequence.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the guidelines demand that immediate threats take precedence in the narrative. Say a patient is suffering from both acute pain, code R52, and chronic pain, code G89.29. The acute pain must be listed first. The coder is essentially telling the payer, look, this is the immediate, pressing fire we had to put out today, while we also manage the ongoing smoldering issue.
But what happens when that acute phase is over and you're dealing with the lingering aftermath? The guidelines call this a sequela or late effect. And here, the sequencing logic actually flips. Let's say a patient is being treated for a scar that resulted from a severe burn years ago. When dealing with late effects, the current medical issue, the scar, becomes the star of the story and is sequenced first. The historical cause, the burn, gets sequenced second, using a very specific seventh character to identify it as the historic cause.
Section 5. The financial domino effect. Now that we understand the grammar, let's bring this explainer full circle back to the financial stakes we introduced at the very beginning. How exactly did flipping two codes cost the hospital $17? Well, it comes down to something called the multiple surgeries modifier rule. When a surgeon performs more than one procedure on the same day, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, applies a discounting system. They'll pay 100% of the fee for the highest value procedure, but they slash the payment for the second procedure down to 50%. This is exactly why the order of the codes is everything.
Let's do the math. If the coder correctly sequences the higher value code first, code 114023, it pays out at 100%, and the lower value code pays out at 50%, totaling $246.23. But if they incorrectly sequence the cheaper code first, it gets paid at 100%, and the expensive procedure gets slashed by 50%, dropping the total payment to $228.52. That $17.71 difference was just for two very minor codes. Multiply that domino effect across a major hospital handling complex surgeries with 5 or 6 procedures at a time, and literally millions of dollars hang in the balance of correct sequencing.
So the crucial point is that this isn't just an administrative headache for hospitals. This matters directly to you as a patient. These strict sequencing rules guarantee that your personal medical history is accurate, that the etiology of your conditions is perfectly tracked, and that your insurance coverage is applied fairly based on the true severity of your visit. Furthermore, accurate sequencing protects providers from inadvertently triggering Medicare fraud and abuse flags, which can easily happen if claims just don't match the required grammatical logic of the billing systems. This entire system is running quietly in the background every single time you step foot into a doctor's office or a hospital. So, next time you receive a medical bill in the mail, take a closer look. Will you just see a random list of prices and numbers, or will you see a carefully sequenced story translated into the hidden language of healthcare? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.